salt consumption and associations with the socio-demographic and health factors among Jamaican adults, also from the Jamaican Salt Consumption Study. So please give her a what? Louise Bennett applause, and as she makes her way. Thank you.
Afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Davidson, for that introduction. So I'm going to be following up on some of the work that Prof. Ferguson just talked about, and I'll be speaking on the accuracy of spot urine as a measure of dietary sodium intake in Jamaicans compared to 24-hour urine sodium collection, and it's a validation study. So as Prof. Ferguson has just outlined, we could say, and we should know, hypertension is a global health concern with 1.28 billion adults between 30 and 79 years old who are affected. The prevalence of hypertension in Jamaica is approximately 33.8% for those who are 15 years and older, and this is from our Jamaica Health and Lifestyle Survey 3. One significant contributor to hypertension is high sodium consumption, and diets high in sodium can lead to increased blood pressure, which increases the risk of heart disease, stroke, and other health complications, as aptly outlined by Prof. Ferguson. Accurate estimation of population sodium consumption is a vital component to the public health response to hypertension. WHO recommends that populations reduce sodium consumption by 25% by 2025. So we've heard of what the consumption levels of sodium is in the Jamaican population and globally. And one thing we have to bear in mind is how are we estimating these rates? So estimation of dietary sodium intake can be via the 24-hour urine sodium excretion, which really is a gold standard method for sodium consumption assessment. Approximately 90% of sodium consumed is excreted in the urine. It's challenging to accomplish because in large population-based studies. One of the other modes of estimating dietary sodium is through spot urine estimation, which are the results that Prof. Ferguson was used to do the estimates that Prof. Ferguson spoke to. The other mode of estimating dietary sodium is through dietary sodium assessment, which we're not going to be speaking to this afternoon. So when we're looking at estimation of urinary sodium excretion, which is a proxy for dietary sodium intake, the 24-hour urine sodium excretion, all urine passed in 24 hours is actually collected in a bottle. Sodium excreted in 24 hours is determined through laboratory analysis. It's difficult to complete by any one of us who have actually tried to do a 24-hour collection. But the good thing going for it is a more accurate measurement for daily sodium consumption and accounts for the variability of sodium consumption as well as hydration status. When you're looking at the spot urine estimation, it's a single urine sample at any time during the day. The sodium is excreted over 24 hours, actually estimated using a formula. It is easier to complete and much less cumbersome. But the drawback is that it is a less accurate measure of daily sodium consumption, and it really does not account for the variability in sodium consumption as well as hydration throughout the day. So, for example, if you consumed a meal that is high in sodium and then you did an immediate collection, it would then reflect a high sodium consumption as compared to if you had a low sodium diet and then you did a collection, then it would have a lower estimate. So that is why the 24-hour collection is a more the gold standard. So really the objective of this presentation is to assess the accuracy of the spot urine sodium estimates as a measure of dietary sodium intake using the PAHO as well as the Intersalt formula compared to the 24-hour urine sodium collection. So very briefly our method. So this is part of the Jamaica Salt Consumption Study, which is a national survey of 60 enumeration districts in Jamaica. The validation study, participants were recruited from the first set of electoral districts in Kingston and St. Andrew region, where we targeted 120 collections. We obtained 109 samples and we're presenting the data for 60 paired samples that were analyzed. The inclusion criteria for analysis was a 24-hour collection of volumes more than 400 mils. Collection times are between 22 and 27 hours. And the spot urine collection was done within 72 hours of a 24-hour collection. So these are the formulae that Prof. Ferguson had just shown. So it's just to say that we did measured sodium from a 24-hour collection, and then we estimated spot sodium from either WHO PAHO formula or the Intersalt formulae. So for statistical data analysis, we're using descriptive analysis, where we looked at sex-specific and total sample summary estimates for both demographic, biomedical, as well as sodium intake variables. And we're doing assessment of the reliability and the agreement between the 24-hour collection as well as the estimated sodium from the formula. So we're going to be using paired t-tests, correlation analysis, as well as the kappa statistics. So the paired t-tests really look at the mean sodium excretion from the 24-hour urine collection that is compared with the sodium estimation using the WHO PAHO formula as well as the Intersalt formula. We'll also be using correlation coefficients, where we're looking at the within pair differences and within pair means for both the sodium excretion estimated from the WHO PAHO formula compared to the 24-hour collection, and we're looking at the sodium estimation from the Intersalt formula compared to the 24-hour urine collection. So for the kappa statistics, what we're going to be doing is that we assess whether persons classified as having high intake of sodium compared to the excretion using the 24-hour were similarly classified as high excretors using the WHO PAHO formula as well as the Intersalt formula. So very quickly for some of our results. So for the baseline characteristics of the participants of the sample, the mean age for both males and females was 49 years, and had significant lower body mass index in males compared to females, but the age as well as the blood pressure measurements were actually similar in both males as well as females. For the summary statistics, what you want to have here, for when we did lab analysis, the spot urine sodium consumption was 2,875 milligrams per liter, and the 24-hour sodium concentration was 2,626 milligrams per liter. When we're looking at the summary statistics, when we actually did the estimates, so when we looked at the 24-hour urine collection over a 24-hour period, overall, the 24-hour urine collection estimated sodium excretion to be 2,564 milligrams per day. The WHO PAHO formula estimated it to be 2,419 milligrams per day, and the Intersalt formula estimated it to be between 2,801 milligrams per day. So as you can see, looking at the trends, the formula do give different estimates, although when we did statistical analysis, they were not significantly different. When we're looking at high sodium excretion, the 24-hour urine collection classified 65% of the people within the population as excreting high, have a sodium intake of more than 2,000 milligrams per day. The WHO PAHO formula estimated it as 55%, and the Intersalt formula estimated it as 81.7%. So we can see that there are some differences when compared, when we're looking at WHO formula, the Intersalt formula, as well as 24-hour urine collection. So it's very important when we're looking to give estimates or changes in sodium excretion in trends in our population. So when we looked at the agreement, the WHO PAHO formula and the Intersalt formula compared to the 24-hour urine collection, the mean difference in the sodium intake was not significantly different from zero. So the estimates, what we're saying is they were similar. So when you compare to the WHO formula as well as the PAHO formula, we would say that they were similar enough, although when you look at the absolute values, they look to be different. When we looked at the classification of sodium dietary intake, the WHO formula, PAHO formula, compared to the 24-hour urine collection, we saw that there was poor agreement, and the Intersalt formula, there was fair agreement when we looked at the kappa statistics of 0.2 for the WHO PAHO formula and 0.48 for the Intersalt formula. So when we look at the repeatability of the agreement, we saw the WHO PAHO formula had poor repeatability. So this means the difference from the 24-hour urine collection increased as the mean increased. And when we looked at the Intersalt formula, it had fair repeatability, where the difference from the 24-hour collection did not increase significantly as the mean increased. So the main findings from our study was when you look at the 24 dietary sodium intake from WHO PAHO formula and the Intersalt formula were compared to the 24-hour urine collection, The mean differences were not significantly different from zero. The agreement in classification of high dietary sodium intake was poor to fair, and the intersalt formula values were more repeatable than the WHO PAHO formula values. So in conclusion, at the population level, either the WHO PAHO formula or the intersalt formula may be used to estimate means or the averages for dietary sodium intake as an alternative for the 24 collection. And with the 24-hour collection as a gold standard, there may be misclassification of individuals for high sodium intake when the formula values are used. So really what that means, at a population level, we can use either the PAHO formula or the intersalt formula for population estimates for sodium consumption. But if we were to look at the individual estimates, so for example, if you wanted to look at what my sodium consumption on a day-to-day basis was, neither one of these formula would be good at an individual level. Thank you.
Boy, I think it must be deafening. I think we need another round of applause. Yes? Get the energy back in the room. Apologies. Dr. Bennett presented on the accuracy of spot urine sodium as a measure of dietary sodium intake in Jamaicans compared to the 24-hour urine sodium excretion. And that was a validation study. So another excellent presentation, and our final presentation for this session will be done by Professor Trevor Ferguson, who will return to discuss the frequency of high salt consumption and associations with the socio-demographic and health factors among Jamaican adults. And again, another element of the Jamaica salt consumption study. So please give him a round of applause. He's been really fantastic today. This is the third presentation. Thank you.
Right, so good afternoon again. Final leg. All right, so here we, thanks Dr. Davidson, and good afternoon everyone. So we're going to talk now about the frequency of high salt consumption or high salt foods, and the association with socio-demographic and health factors among Jamaican adults. So most of us are familiar with the concept of the nutrition transition, which has resulted in increased consumption of ultra-processed foods, that are foods that are high in fats, salt, and sugars, and reduced consumption of minimally processed foods. Many people are choosing pre-prepared, pre-packaged, ready-to-eat, highly processed foods that are manufactured outside of the home and are of lower nutritional value. Now, ultra-processed foods are believed to be a major contributor to adverse health outcomes. Now, with increased development and industrialization, there has been some improvement in economic performances globally. However, while income and purchasing power have increased, leisure time has decreased. And this has led to limited time to prepare foods at home. Of course, these will be foods of higher nutritional value. And the increased availability of pre-prepared foods has further compounded the problem, resulting in further reducing the consumption of home-prepared meals. So we have shown previously that, of course, high salt consumption is associated with adverse health outcomes, but overall dietary quality and health are greatly impacted by these changes in disease patterns. And we have recently documented high sodium consumption and low potassium intake in the Jamaican population, which may be due largely to high consumption of ultra-processed foods as well as high salt foods, but we have limited data on these occurrences. So the objective of this study was to estimate the frequency of high salt foods consumption among Jamaican adults and evaluate association between socio-demographic and health factors. So again, this was a cross-sectional study from the Jamaica Salt Consumption Study. We collected data in 2022 to 2023. Participants were 18 years old and older and were from 60 nationally representative enumeration districts. Trained interviewers collected information on a 60-item food frequency questionnaire, of which 39 items were classified as high salt foods and 21 items classified as low salt foods. And this classification was done by our nutritionists on the team. We then created scores to estimate the daily intake of high salt foods and low salt food items and categorize these into tertiles. So this is a list of foods that were classified as ultra-processed or high salt. We won't go into the details here, but of course, this can be shared afterwards as required. And we also have our list of minimally processed foods, which we can also share. So in essence, we looked at the frequency of consumption of each of those 39, as well as the 21 items that were included in the minimally processed foods. So with regards to our statistical analyses, we used State of version 18. We estimated means and proportion for outcome and exposure variables and the various covariates. Then we assessed associations with age, sex, and socioeconomic status, as well as other health characteristics. For these analyses, we use multivariable, multinomial logistic regression to obtain odds ratios for the associations, and for these, we compared those in the highest tertile of high salt foods to those in the lowest tertile. The estimates were again weighted for survey design, and analyses were restricted to 952 participants who had complete data on the variables of interest. So looking at our results. So we had 952 participants, 578 males, 374 females. Mean age was 40.9 years. 26.4% had self-reported hypertension. 10.7% had diabetes, 11.5% had high cholesterol, 17% were smokers, and 30.7% had low physical activity levels. Now, in terms of the frequency of consumption of the various food items, so for high salt foods, we estimated that on average, persons consume 6.4 high salt food items per day, compared to 4.8 high salt food items per day. And this was higher in men compared to women for both the high salt foods and the low salt foods. Now, when we looked at the consumptions by age category, the frequency of consumption of high salt foods significantly decreased with age. There was no significant rural-urban differences. For low salt foods, again, frequency of consumption decreased with age, and for low salt foods, there was a higher consumption of low salt foods among urban residents. With regards to factors associated with high salt foods, again, this is looking at the men, and we're comparing those in the upper tertile of high salt food consumption to those in the lower tertile of high salt food consumption. So significant factors associated were age, odds ratio 0.94, suggesting that as persons got older, they were eating less high salt foods. Those with higher levels of education, for high school education as well as more than high school, were more likely to consume high salt foods, with odds ratios of 2.07 and 3.02, and men who currently smoke tobacco were also more likely to consume high salt foods. Among the women, again, age was significantly associated in an inverse direction, so older age meant less consumption of high salt foods. Women who were overweight or obese had higher odds of high salt food consumption with an odds ratio of 1.8, as well as those with more than high school education with an odds ratio of 2.98. Women who had a history of high cholesterol levels were less likely to consume high salt foods. So our main findings, Jamaicans are consuming approximately 6 high salt food items per day compared to 5 low salt food items. High salt foods is lower among older persons, but higher among those with higher education. Men who smoke and women with obesity were more likely to consume high salt foods, while women with high cholesterol were less likely to consume high salt foods. So we recognized, in terms of one strength of this study, we used survey weights to ensure that the data were nationally representative. A limitation, the study only addressed the frequency of consumption. We didn't have data on quantity of food consumed, and therefore we cannot estimate the quantity of sodium consumed. However, we can conclude that most adult Jamaicans have high consumption of high salt foods, and public health interventions are needed to educate the population on healthy food choices and to increase the availability of healthy options and encourage more home-prepared meals. These are the references. Thank you very much.
Three excellent presentations, especially post-lunch, talking about sodium consumption. So at this time, we invite questions into the room and online. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so question is sodium citrate a good alternative to sodium chloride?
I'm not very sure of that. I don't know if we wanted to have the nutritionist get sodium citrate. I've not seen that recommended in the literature.
Probably not, because sodium citrate is actually quite sour. Right, so no.
Okay, another one. Did you consider comparing high salt consumption with the occurrence of mental health concerns?
So we haven't looked at that directly. I think we do have data. I mean, I'm not 100% sure whether or not persons reported depression. We would have to double check our questionnaire to see if that is there. But yes, that's something that sometimes, comfort food eating that. And if we don't have it now, we can probably look at it in a future study. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much for this excellent presentation. My question goes to both of the presenters. The first one is concerning the two tests, the PAHU test, and the other one was Intersalt. Now, if we use one of those tests, can we say that the validity of that test, can the validity of that test be done, or it has to be the two for us to be able to say what is okay, what is acceptable?
So, from our study, so when you're estimating sodium consumption or excretion, there are several formulae that are available out there, and these are only two. These are the two popular ones that are. So we wanted to check for both of them, both the PAHU and the Intersalt, to see if either one is more comparable to 24-hour urine collection. We have further work that we're going to do to see if we have to work on it a little bit further to see if we would recommend one versus the next, or combining both of them together.
Okay.
So that's what we'd say to that.
All right. Thank you. Mm-hmm. The next question for...
So, in essence, from what we have shown, so when we look at the mean sodium intake at the population level, whether we use the Intersalt formula or we use the PAHU formula, it was not significantly different from that obtained from the 24 hours. So either can be used. So you don't have to do both. But what we saw was that PAHU levels were a bit lower and the intersalt was a bit higher, which is why in my report we use the average of the two. So what we will be doing is to do further statistical analyses to try to assess whether or not that holds, to say, is the mean of the two better than doing one? But if you have one formula and you're using that at a population level, it is okay. But at the individual level, you may end up with misclassification. So in essence, at the population level, the errors cancel out, so to speak. But at the individual level, there's probably too much error.
That's why I was asking to me both. Thank you. Then the next question is, you said something about the women who had high cholesterol or individual with high cholesterol had lower salt intake. All right. Is it as a result of their diagnosis that they began to be conscious to have reduction in their salt intake, or it was just by chance?
Well, so in this case, for these analyses, we looked at persons who, this is based on doctor diagnosis of high cholesterol. So, of course, you know that if you're diagnosed with high cholesterol, you're going to be instructed by your doctor to go on a low cholesterol diet. Now, going on a low cholesterol diet will eliminate a number of the high salt foods. So it is likely that this is a result of persons being on a low cholesterol diet and therefore eliminating some of the high salt foods. So that's the most likely reason why we saw that association.
Okay, thank you. Now, based on this study, will it be okay to indicate or make a statement that persons who go for regular checkup should do a regular cholesterol and all the tests on the visit, just to be sure that you don't send somebody home who would have already been on a high cholesterol level or any of the high salt? Should it be something we do regularly
So
as a routine test?
Yeah. There are guidelines in terms of screening for the health condition. So we recommend an annual check for high cholesterol. So once per year usually would be fine. We recommend, of course, that persons also be checked regularly for high blood pressure. Persons should be screened for diabetes, etc. And those are the ones that are recommended for screening, and we would expect annual screening for adults. In terms of, there isn't a recommendation to assess individual level salt consumption, but of course we're going to advise everyone to have a healthy diet, and that healthy diet will include significantly reducing the consumption of processed foods and high salt foods to result in better health. So yes, we would want persons to be reminded about a healthy diet, although at the individual level, doing your, checking your urine for sodium is not something I would recommend, but definitely annual checks for cholesterol, diabetes, kidney problems, etc., and screening for high blood pressure is recommended for all adults, plus a healthy diet.
Thank you, sir. Not to keep you on, just give me one recommendation for a healthy society based on your knowledge of the one good recommendation for a healthy Jamaican population. 2-point-something million. We all want to be healthy. What should be done? Thank you.
Well, if we eat more home-prepared, natural-type foods, we would be better off and more healthy. So, she said one. So, a focus on home-prepared as opposed to processed and foods prepared outside the home. So let's get back to the dining table with mother cooking around the fire.
All right, thank you. And we do have another question. We have one more. Yes, go ahead for me, please.
Okay. What can be done to have the salt content of high salt foods decrease, and are manufacturing companies of the high salt foods aware of these studies that are being performed?
All right, so I guess some of the answers is contained in the question. So, so first of all, we spoke about what we can do at the individual level. So in our meal preparation, we want to reduce salt when we're cooking. We want to discourage adding salt at the table completely. And of course, to use less processed foods, read the labels, etc. So more home-based, low-salt foods. In terms of the manufacturers, I think they're aware, at least at the superficial level, there may not be a strong commitment. Some manufacturers do produce low-salt items, or you'll see lightly salted, reduced salt. So there are some efforts that are being made, but that really needs to be quadrupled. What is being done now is maybe just the very minimal, but we need to work with industry to produce healthier foods for the population, and that requires a whole of government, whole of society approach to get that. So reformulation, reduce salt, reduce fats, reduce sugars definitely is recommended.
And I think I'd like to add to that to say part of it is as well as our responsibility. So what we also have to do is maybe do as well. So people to read the labels and so. So it's not only on government, but we have our part to play as well. So it's part of an education, I think.
Okay, any other further questions? Okay. So at this time, I'd just like you to thank our presenters, Professor Trevor Ferguson, Dr. Nadia Bennett. Please give them a round of applause, Louise Bennett. No, that sound thank you, and pia. So we have come to the end of a very excellent session, obviously with 2 salt, yes. And so we're moving to the commercial break. I hope you took away something from this session. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Oh, we have a presentation to make? Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. It would be remiss of us to not recognize all the persons who contribute to this conference. This came out in our opening ceremony this morning with respect to all the stakeholders. And one of the members of the team are our moderators. And so we want to especially recognize Dr. Tamu Davidson and thank her for moderating this session.
We don't have to turn around. Oh, dear.
We also wish to, I see that Prof. Ferguson is leaving, but we also want to especially recognize Prof. Ferguson in terms of the feature presentation that he gave this morning. So we want to just give him yes. For those who didn't hear online, somebody is saying check it for sodium. At this time, we can go to the commercial break.
What you got? I feel stressed out. 2 months from my baby and a peer problem with breastfeeding. The baby not get enough milk like when I'm in at the hospital.
So why you never tell me?
I didn't even know. I not rest. A peer problem with breastfeeding. People keep on telling me something to give the baby bush tea and say it good for him. Then my friend them